Viewers, welcome back to Rise and Shine, the live here on Tobago, Channel 5. On our program this morning, we're chatting with Mr. Martin George, attorney at law, also commissioner of the Police Service Commission, and he's also one of the directors for Crime Stoppers. And Martin, good morning, and welcome to you, Mr. George. Mr. George.
Good morning, Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here, and Happy New Year to you all.
Always good to have you on our program. Always a pleasure to have you with us. We're talking this morning about our authorities misbehaving. I mean, because we're talking misbehaving in public life. And I'm not even sure which story to start with first. We have the issue here with ACP Reyes misbehaving on a flight to Tobago. Then we have the issue here with SRPs treating with a disabled man in Trinidad. So many things on the table. Let's start with what has happened with regards ACP Reyes.
Okay, but I'll just like to widen the ambit of the discussion to make it more general in terms of police abuse of authority. And that's a point I've made several times, in that police officers, and particularly here in Tobago, seem to be of the view that they can lord it over you, and that's right, that they can enforce things on you, and they don't have to account to anyone because they have the law, so to speak, on their side. And that's not the role of a police officer. Their motto is to protect and serve. Instead, what they do is try to use and abuse, and take advantage of people, and that's not right. And the thing is, I think we need many more discussions like this for the citizens of Tobago particularly, and then my focus is always on Tobago, for the citizens of Tobago to become aware that they have rights also, and they can stand up. You can file a constitutional motion, you could make an application, file for judicial review, and challenge the actions of rogue officers. Because you have other avenues such as the Police Complaints Authority, and you have a new chairman there, Mr. David West, and you can also make a complaint to the Commissioner of Police because they do have their internal disciplinary procedures. However, often persons find that the results they get when you go that route doesn't appear to be fast enough. I mean, just look at the same situation there with Mr. Reyes. That occurred almost 2 weeks ago, and you are still hearing from the police hierarchy that the matter is still under investigation. Right. Why must it take 2 weeks and counting to investigate what is a very simple and clear scenario where you had the report from the flight attendants the very day they prepared a report? It was available the next day. The media was able to have the report and print it. You have situations where fellow passengers gave statements. In the media, I saw statements from fellow passengers. What else are you investigating? And this is why the public lacks confidence in the police service, because if a simple matter such as that, whereby you had actions on a flight, you have all the statements from persons around. Obviously, you ask Mr. Reyes himself, give a statement, you then wait, and then you make a decision. You have email gate still pending. You have so many things. The Dana Sitahal murder. Everything is just pending, and all they tell you is, oh, it's a matter of national security. We can't disclose the details. We can't tell you where we're at. That's poppycock. In any developed country, the chief of police will come on the television and say, well, okay, this is the update. This is where we're at. This is what we have so far. This is what we're looking to do. We don't get, all we get are, excuses, fluff, and hype. And then they're telling you, oh, well, look at the numbers, compare, and then it's a selective comparison. They say, okay, let's look at 2009 and compare to 2014. Okay, all right, so what? At the end of the day, if the public doesn't feel safer, if citizens don't feel that sense of confidence, then you are still failing on the job. It's not a numbers game. This is not murder by numbers.
Right.
If you understand me, so to trot out a whole lot of meaningless statistics and tell people, well, look, if you make a statistical comparison with this year and this first quarter of that other year, then you will see there's an improvement. Oh, please, does that help you? Does that make you feel more comfortable when you have scenarios such as the 2 Germans being murdered in Tobago? Again, no progress with that. You don't know what's the status of that. So you have so many things that have been happening, And the police have only themselves to blame for not inspiring that sense of confidence. We at the Police Service Commission level, we've tried to do some draft proposals for improvement, first of all in the process of appointment, because that's really ridiculous. Taking years and years to appoint a commissioner makes no sense.
But why is that? We've had an acting.
That's right. So, and he's still acting
right.
because the majority of the process is out of our control. It's administrative, whereby it goes through the Office of the Director of Personnel Administration, and they have appointed NIPDEC as the agency to select the recruiting agency, which will then select a short list of candidates from which they will select those to be interviewed. And when those are interviewed,
George,
they then send
do these requirements have timelines to them, or are they just in a vacuum and just open?
In a vacuum, unfortunately. In a vacuum. And well, that's a difficulty.
Well, no wonder
it makes no sense.
We are in the position that we are in.
That's correct. And you see, NIPDEC is not accountable to us at the Police Service Commission, so therefore we can't give them instructions and say, look, give us in 2 weeks or you're fired. We can't do that. They're not accountable to us. They're accountable to their line minister, which is different. The DPA's office is not accountable to us either, because they provide administrative support. So
But what can your commission do to change the whole process, to shorten this process?
Well, we've suggested legislative change. Again, that has been put before the parliament. It's up to the politicians to debate and then pass the changes if they approve.
All right, remind us again here of the role of the Police Service Commission, please.
The Police Service Commission, we are there to assess, review, monitor the performance of the Commissioner of Police, the Deputy Commissioners, and their management of the entire service. That is the primary function of the Police Service Commission.
All right. Now we've been following this story, and it is disappointing. Now, we heard last week in an article last week where Diane Haddad, chairman of the Tobago Chamber of Commerce, is calling on Mr. Reyes to apologize publicly. Apologize to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. What are your thoughts on that?
The point is, at the end of the day, whether he apologizes or not, I think it's really irrelevant once sufficient disciplinary action is taken by the police hierarchy. And the apology is really a private issue as to whether he feels, the need to make a public mea culpa. Whether he does that or not, I think once they take the disciplinary measures against him, that is sufficient as far as I'm concerned.
In terms of disciplinary measures for this situation, what would you deem acceptable for the action?
Well, it would really be something for the police commissioner to determine in terms of, how he treats with it. Of course, that would be based upon the findings of the investigation, which apparently is not yet concluded. So even I can't pronounce on that until they tell us publicly what are the findings of the investigation. But as I said, for something so simple. So if you are taking more than 2 weeks to investigate something like this, how would you solve any murder?
Let me ask you something. There's some, coming back to that, but there's some who are saying that Mr. Reyes did not identify himself while he was on the flight, and he only did so after he was taken to the police. The airport authority. Did it matter whether or not he identified himself? This is who I am while on the flight.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because the point is, at the end of the day, you are a citizen, and once there are rules and restrictions in terms of the Civil Aviation Authority, then you comply. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be the Prime Minister. If the flight attendant tells you take off your telephone, you take it off. I was on an American Airlines flight coming back from Miami last year, and there was an American oil driller who was coming down to Trinidad, and the flight was delayed, and he apparently had been, consuming some drinks before boarding. So he was very well soused by the time he got on board.
Interesting,
you know,
too.
and just the fact that the flight was delayed, he started, you know, talking loudly. Now, we're not taxiing or anything. We're just on board and just waiting, you know, for them to sort out some little technical glitch, you know, and, you know, so the purser asked him to, you know, keep it down a bit. And he kept talking loudly. And the very next thing, they made a call. They came, security guards took him off. He was outside identifying his bags, and they carted him off. They do not make any joke with stuff like that. And you see, the thing is, they have that authority, and we must respect that.
And this brings me to the point, Mr. George, the International Civil Aviation Authority, right? That's an international authority as regards to aircraft in flight and, you know, on the ground and what have you, once you're within the vicinity of the aircraft. We are loath to investigate and to come up with, you know, some sort of recommendation or result quickly. Notwithstanding what we do in Trinidad and Tobago, do you think that this authority would take this matter, you know, into its purview and act on it?
I would imagine that once our Civil Aviation Authority from Trinidad, if they invite them in, or if they make a request for them to, you know, take some action or take some step in it, then of course they would. I think otherwise they would normally let you manage your own domestic affairs. Otherwise, you know, there's no need for them to get involved in every little issue. But of course, if it's escalated up the chain, and I'm not necessarily sure this is the type of matter that needs to be escalated, I think we can deal with it quite adequately here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right, now, you indicated earlier, Mr. George, that you wanted to broaden the gap here, because we were talking about just about 2 issues here, but you wanted to broaden the gap. Now, we have complaints even on the ground here in Tobago of police officers slapping civilians. We have issues of police officers misbehaving.
Generally, and it's a trend that you keep observing, and I don't know what is the thinking or the culture within the police service, but there are quite a few officers who seem to feel that they have the right to physically beat, abuse, assault someone once they are under their charge. So in other words, once I've arrested you, I could do with you as I wish. You know, and you have so many stories coming out. But I think, unfortunately, in the past, persons have felt, well, I just have to accept it because this is the norm or this is an authority figure. And I want us to keep educating the public that these things are not right, they are not acceptable. We must stand up against it. Go to your attorney, get some legal help, even if it's legal aid, whatever, file an action. Take a stand. That's the only way the system is going to change.
All right, we're coming back to this issue just after the break this morning. Viewers, stay tuned to join us just after this. Viewers, welcome back to Rise and Shine. We're still chatting this morning with Mr. Martin George, attorney at law and commissioner on the Public Service Commission. And Police Service Commission, a slip of the tongue there, I do apologize. Now, Mr. George, just before we took the break, we were chatting on the issue here of police officers, them flouting the law, believing that they are above the law. I wanted to piggyback here on the issue of a recent issue here of a police officer and an SRP who took advantage of a disabled man, a man who's differently abled. And this is a situation that took place in Trinidad. Now, in one news article yesterday, I saw where the police officer was charged and the SRP was fined. Did it matter here that this was a gentleman, this was a person who was differently abled, as opposed to someone who is not?
Well, the thing is, I guess it just makes it more of an egregious breach of your procedure and policy to inflict that kind of treatment on someone who is differently abled. But it just gives you an idea. If this could be done in the streets, in broad daylight, in public, what police officers actually do to citizens when they have them arrested and in the back of a police station or in a cell where nobody can see. So if you could do this out in public, broad daylight, open in the streets, what type of attitude or mentality would you have to prisoners who are under your care or under your charge at the station where nobody can see? And this is a culture in the police service that needs to change. I think that the present association, they are trying to change that culture and thinking. Mr. Seals and Mr. Ramisa, they really, speak out against these abuses and they condemn them. And they are trying to get police officers to understand that that's not the way you treat with citizens at all. I mean, in some other country, that man would be able to sue the state for millions, Unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, our scale of awards is much lower, so therefore, his recompense from the courts is not going to be significant. But the thing is, we need to find ways to ensure that the police officers are held accountable. Because if you don't do that, they will continue in this type of reckless behavior.
But even right here in Tobago, Eddie, and you can bear me out here, even right here in Tobago, we've had situations where persons have been arrested in connection with whatever the crime is, and family members not allowed to see them for days on end.
But
and when they do, it's because they are...
Recently, we had to intervene in a scenario where someone was held for 10 days in a police station, no charges laid, not been released. And I mean, the law is fairly clear that once 48 hours have passed, you need to make a decision. In other words, it's either I have the evidence or I don't. And if you don't have the evidence, you can't keep the person in custody and then you now go in and look for the evidence. That's not the way the law is supposed to function. But again, unless families are able to get that legal support for that legal intervention, you often find that you don't get the results. But speaking of abuse of a disabled person, we had a scenario a couple of years ago whereby a client had come to us complaining of being abused by a very senior police officer at the FCB car park. Right? Apparently he's a CD vendor. Now the thing is, we filed the action and the evidence was given in court. The judge, on weighing the evidence, felt that the evidence of the disabled man did not meet the threshold for him to, make a finding in his favor. But it certainly sent a very strong signal and very strong message to that officer that, look, there are consequences for your actions, because we also joined the Commissioner of Police as his senior officer in charge and responsible for the actions.
Now, what should the public do? Because these are very real, everyday scenarios, and that persons live, and there is a fear, there is a very little or no trust in the police service. What action should the public take if this type of
well, actually, I saw a statement which was supposed to emanate from the office of the commissioner. I don't know if it came from the commissioner himself, but a statement whereby they said that it is good for citizens to have their cell phones to record and tape when they see officers misbehaving. And unfortunately, we have to resort to that, because otherwise you have little or no evidence, and then it's your word against theirs, as I gave in that scenario with this person in Tobago. And depending on how they believe, sometimes there may be a bias or preference to believe the police, over the citizens. So I would encourage citizens, once they see something, videotape it.
Even on that note, Mr. George, that is very risky even for civilians, because I can recall a few years ago, a couple of our colleagues here at Tobago Channel 5 were recording the Fisherman Fete at Charlottesville. And there was a story of police brutality where some officers walked up to a gentleman, slapping and physically abusing him. And our guys who were recording the event turned and started taping, and the officers demanded they hand over the camera, demanded they get the tape, and were brutalizing our guys.
Well, you see, again, they have no authority in law to do that. But of course, They recognize the danger and the risk to themselves because they will be exposed. So that's why they would do that. But that's not correct. It's not right. And that's something that certainly I'm sure your station would have followed up with the Commissioner of Police to ensure that it doesn't happen again and to ensure that you get back your tape because that's your evidence.
Okay. Mr. George, what about these SRP officers working alone? Because I think that when they were being trained, it was said that they would be working with regular police officers. They would not be on a beat or be outside by themselves, so that the regular police officer would be able to assist them. These officers train much shorter than the regular police officer, the SRP officers I'm talking about. Where I think there should be more training for them than the regular police officer. So while you're training the regular police officer for 6 months, I feel that the SRP must be trained for 9 months because of the qualification deficit and so forth. But the authorities see it otherwise. But do you think that is a wise thing to send 2 SRP officers out on duty by themselves, or should they be accompanied by a seasoned regular?
Well, the thing is, I'll tell you this. It's in many ways an artificial distinction because SRPs by and large carry out the same functions, roles, responsibilities and duties as the regular police officers.
They are not trained,
I understand that.
In their training.
But I'll tell you, once you have sufficient experience on the job, I think you can learn the skill set necessary even though you may have had a shorter training period. And the exposure sometimes to the seasoned officers is exactly what leads you astray. Because what they do is inculcate the bad habits in you because they teach you, hey, this is the system in here, this is how it works, this is what you have to do, this is, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it's a two-edged sword in that, yes, you can get good experience, good advice, but you can also get very bad and misleading advice and guidance from those who should know better. So it's something that is institutional. One of the recommendations I've always made is that we should have an internal affairs unit within the police service which functions on an ongoing, continuous basis by persons whom the police officers don't know are internal affairs.
One exist, Mr. George?
Well, right, no, this is the distinction I'm saying. By persons whom they don't know are internal affairs. I've had the experience of visiting the Toronto police headquarters, and it's a massive building. And in that building, there's so many people, you don't know who is who. And lots of the senior officers, you know, sometimes they would see somebody come into the elevator and their conversations will just stop because they're not sure this person might be internal affairs. So in other words, these are people working among you on a daily basis, but their role is to observe. Unfortunately, that's the only way you really effectively deal with it. You basically have to have persons inside spying on police to keep them in line and keep them in check. That's how a proper internal affairs division works. We don't have that presently. Everybody knows who the supposed internal affairs. So in other words, you're just like,
coming tomorrow.
You just work around them. Yeah. That's right. You work around them. So it's not effective at all. We need to change that and introduce that system. So it could be, if you bring them in as your civilian staff, it could be that, okay, this person is just a typist sitting in the office typing, but their role and function is that they are an internal affairs officer, but under the guise of being a typist. And unfortunately, that's the only way you're going to police the system.
Maybe sometime yet for us to reach that stage. But certainly
what happens when the person is related to the commissioner or related to the senior police officer?
But Mr. George, there has been discourse with loss of arms and ammunition at police station. In Tobago, I know that at present, we have an officer who was in charge of the ammunition. I think he's on suspension. In Trinidad, in some stations, I could call St. Joseph.
St. Joseph Station, that's one for sure. Then you had one in South. And then, of course, the big one was the Forensic Science Center. Yeah. 40 firearms disappeared. And again, wait, just now, again, the investigation is ongoing. And when they ask for an update, oh, it's at a highly sensitive stage. That's the same nonsense they trot out every time when they don't have answers. Oh, we can't say anything because it's highly confidential. Please, you're not solving anything. You look at the detection rate within the police service, it's abysmally poor because they are not doing their jobs, plain and simple. How many undercover officers do you have actively out there, trying to gather the information that is necessary to bring it back to solve the crimes? They don't want to do that. Everybody wants to sit down in the station. They have cable TV, they have air condition. When you go upstairs, they have beds. Man, life is nice. Yeah, why should they bother to go and do the hard work?
True, but the point I want to make here, Mr. George, or following the point I want to make here, there was some talk that officers would have lodged weapons at fire station, at police station for safekeeping. When they go back, it's tampered with, some of the ammunition may be short.
And that is a fact. I can tell you, it is a fact. It does happen. It has happened. And again, it shows the recklessness and the lack of accountability which we have within the service. And the police officers themselves know that, look, even if there's an investigation, nothing ever comes of it, so therefore they are comfortable to continue what they're doing. They then now might rent your gun or lend your firearm to persons out there in the criminal underworld who will use your weapon, then they put it back, or sometimes it may not come back at all.
Until you return.
Yeah, that's the point. So it's really ridiculous. It's really, really ridiculous, and we need to do a lot to change that. But what I would say for Tobago, I want us to look at the issue of security in Tobago in the sense that, as far as I'm aware, there's no secretary specifically assigned as a secretary to deal with Tobago security. We need to create something of that nature whereby we start taking charge of security issues in Tobago. You'll recall I mentioned previously that the THA should set up a victims support unit, right? Separate and apart from whatever the police service is doing. Because in other words, if the THA is your main manager and administrator of Tobago, then they must have a security arm or security division. You can't just sit back and say, well, okay, you're leaving it to the police. What are your strategies? What are the things that you are recommending in conjunction with the police service to work together to improve security in Tobago? We have had too much money and too much, resources being pumped into the THA for the abysmally poor results that we keep getting from them all the time. I hear them speaking about having to make cutbacks because of the falling oil prices and the falling oil price and the economy of Tobago. And I find it ludicrous. What economy does Tobago have? Really? Falling oil prices affecting us? It doesn't matter. We wait on a handout every year from Trinidad. So it's what Trinidad gives us, that's what we work with. So whether oil prices fall or rise, it may just mean that they may give us less or give us more, but that has no direct bearing on Tobago's economy, because Tobago does not have an economy, plain and simple.
But we must get a certain amount, the THA must get a certain amount, 4.0.
Right, in terms of the percentage. But then if the overall budget is lower, then obviously your percentage becomes lower. So.
Sure.
Now, with the introduction of cable, we see shows on cable TV, Law and Order, CSI, all of these shows. These shows coming to the public have allowed us to see, I guess, the way it's done and the way things are done in the U.S. How quickly crimes are solved according to TV time, probably. But the importance, the level of importance, the level of efficiency that is executed to solve a crime. Does that happen, and any of that happen, or is that just TV for us? Does any of that happen here in Trinidad and Tobago, or in the Caribbean?
What we have in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a very nice scenario whereby we have, I think, they're actors. They dress up in these lovely white suits from head to toe, gloves, everything.
Forensics.
And they look fantastic.
Yes.
They really look good. But I assume that they are all paid actors because they never solve anything, but they put on a fantastic show At every crime scene, you know, they tape it off, they cordon off the area, and they come out in their lovely white, and, you know, they're looking busy doing nothing, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you are not producing the results, what investigations are you really doing? What scientific analysis are you bringing back which can now help us to solve the matter? If you're not doing that, then you're wasting time.
But I'm glad that you bring that up, Mr. George. And one of the things that is going on in my mind all the time is a database for Trinidad and Tobago, you know, a human database. Whether you would take our fingerprints when we go to do our ID cards, and so you have everybody's fingerprint. So when the fingerprint is seen, you can match it against something. Because as you rightly said there, what is the evidence being matched against? Is it the known criminals or the so-called criminal gangs that you know you would match the database to see whether it's one of them who commit the crime? I don't know what are your thoughts on being in the commission, you know, but I think that there should be a broader base, a broader scale of people, number of people. And I think the Minister of National Security can recommend that, you know, once you didn't infringe people's rights, I know you're a lawyer, right?
Well, that is exactly what I was thinking, because I think most people would object to that on the basis that it appears to be trespassing, first of all, on your right to privacy, plain and simple. Because if you are not a suspect or not in any way connected with anything criminal or remotely criminal, then you may ask, why does the government or the state want to keep my fingerprints on file? I mean, of course, the counter argument may be, and I mean, I could very well see the officials of maybe the Ministry of National Security saying, well, if you have nothing to hide, then what are you worrying about? But it doesn't matter. The point is, if that's your right to privacy, then that's your right. And if you choose to exercise it, then, you know, I think that certainly you're entitled to do so. So I think that might be a difficult one.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you, but we seem to be cutting, you know, because we have to give, you know, the legal profession has to give sometimes, you know, so that we can maintain order, right? And I think, you know, the people's rights would be looked after by you and by other lawyers. So even if I give my fingerprint and something unwarranted is done to me, I'll come to you and say, Mr. George, yes, the government has my fingerprint, but I wasn't the person who so and so and so, and you would defend me. But to withhold the print, then what would these same people in white, what is the basis that they are working on? Just in a vacuum? They must be working towards something, and then if I didn't commit a crime, I have nothing to fear, really.
Yeah, no, well, they would be working with the fingerprint records office, the Criminal Records Office, which has fingerprints of known perpetrators. Yes, that's it, known perpetrators.
I'm saying that they should broaden it because what is happening now, if you notice now, the police are not solving crime because they don't have 99% of the fingerprint that of people who are committing
I'm
crime.
not sure it's necessarily because of a lack of
that could be
fingerprints. I'm not necessarily sure it's that. I think it's just a lack of basic police intelligence. Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a lack of basic police intelligence, and I use that in two senses. Mm-hmm. Police intelligence in the terms of intelligence gathering, and police intelligence in terms of basic common sense. I have seen, unfortunately, I've seen many officers approach investigations from the most obtuse and absurd angles. They just lack basic common sense, and that's a problem.
But doesn't that speak to the level of training?
You wonder whether they have interest.
It's the training, and I guess the product that you start with.
But sometimes I wonder whether they have interest in the investigation as well, the way they move opposite to
you also have to wonder at that. So there's a lot we need to do to correct it within the police service. But as I say, the THA should not sit back and wait for the police to do everything. They have to be proactive in terms of security for Tobago, because I tell you, that's what you are selling Tobago as. Safe, serene, secure. If you don't have that, trust me, you don't have any product to sell.
All right, well, Mr. George, we're getting ready to wrap up with you.
Sure.
Now, this is the first interview with you for the year, and we're looking forward to many, many more in 2015.
Certainly.
So
It's always a pleasure.
your dream, your hopes for Tobago for 2015?
Well, 2015 is an election year for Trinidad and Tobago, and I think that Tobago needs to have proper choices in terms of determining the way forward. And that's something that we have to take in a very serious context, because I've always said Tobago must show the lead. Tobago must take its role and responsibility as leaders of Trinidad and Tobago. We've had individuals who have risen to the highest positions of authority in Trinidad and Tobago, but as an island, we have to start taking the lead.
Sure.
All right, but thank you so much this morning, Mr. Martin George, attorney at law. Viewers, we want to apologize to you this morning as we take our break. We've got no Rise and Shine morning news, but we'll be back just after this, and we'll be chatting with Mrs. Vanilla Allen Toppin, Minister Minister in the Ministry of the People and Social Development, and our MP for Tobago East. Stay tuned. Join us just after this. What happened there?